mga fossils, also because of Mayrix and the NanoWorks Labs recent publication. And today we're very excited to have Dr. Mairin Balisi, and as she gives us a peek into her research and what she has unearthed literally at one of the most extraordinary fossil sites in the world, the La Brea Tar Pits located at the heart of Los Angeles. So I still remember yung La Brea Tar Pits kahit nung undergrad pa ako. So I'm sure many of us here are very familiar with this site. Finding the ice age in your backyard. So besides the interesting history or ice age story, Doc Myrene's talk also reminds us that remnants of the Earth's history need not be confined to remote landscapes. So hindi natin kailangang mapunta sa mga very remote areas or museums, but can also be found beneath our very feet, right within our backyard. In fact, dito sa NIGS, so for the information of Doc Myrene, so meron po kaming rock exposure dito and marami yung aming mga paleo enthusiasts ay marami ding na-unearth dito sa aming munting rock exposure dito sa right in the middle of our building dito po sa UP NIGS. And so, yeah, before we delve into Doc Marine's presentation, allow me to thank the organizers of today's lecture, the NanoWorks Laboratory, the Paleontological Society of the Philippines. Doc Alisa is the president, and of course, the Juvenis Orbis Geological Fraternity. And on behalf of the UPNIX community, we once again thank Doc Myrene for sharing her time with us today. Please make yourselves comfortable as we listen to her exciting research, and we all look forward to the interesting questions and discussions after. Maraming salamat po, and magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramos, for that warm welcome. And now let us call on Dr. Alisa Pilea Alampay, the head of the NanoWorks Laboratory and the president of the Paleontological Society of the Philippines, to give us a few words.
Thank you, Gian. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jenny, for being here to welcome Myrene and welcome everybody to the talk. We've been waiting for Myrene for quite some time. I was just telling her earlier that her name has been on our task list in the lab. So every week we've been, it's as if we know you already, Myrene, from the past year, because Alan has booked you for quite some time for one of the lab activities. So we're just so happy that you're here, and I'm also excited about the La Brea finds that you studied. I have a very intimate relationship with La Brea, having lived in California for some time. So I visited it quite a few times. So I'm really happy that you're presenting your finds in La Brea. So welcome, Irene. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alisa. And now, let us call on Dr. Alan Gil Fernando to formally welcome our speaker for today's lecture series.
Okay, so good morning sa lahat. Good morning, Mairin. Good morning, Jenny and Ma'am Alisa. So before I introduce the speaker, so siguro konting background lang what the NIGS lecture series is all about. So the NIGS lecture series is a regular academic activity that we conduct here at NIGS with support from different academic laboratories and student organizations like the Juvenis Orbis Geological Fraternity, who is also the sponsor of this event. So the lecture series is a platform to showcase cutting-edge research in geosciences and related fields. It's also aimed to promote academic exchange and collaboration, expose students and the faculty to recent developments in geology, paleontology, environmental science, and allied disciplines, and invite local and international experts to share their recent research or recent work. It's also a reflection of our institute's commitment to scientific education, research excellence, and public engagement in earth and environmental sciences, which is aligned actually with the role of our institute as the Philippines' National Center of Excellence in the field of geosciences. And we couldn't be more grateful that our speaker today is someone who really can help us in these aspects. So our speaker graduated with a BA Integrative Biology and BA Comparative Literature degrees from the University of California in Berkeley, MS Ecology and Evolutionary Biology degree from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a PhD in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology degree from the University of California in Los Angeles. So, our speaker is a leading figure in the field of paleontology, whose work exemplifies both scientific excellence and deep public engagement. Her most recent work published in the journal Paleobiology on identifying the big questions in paleontology, a community-driven project is a must-read actually for all undergraduate and graduate students who wish to pursue a career in paleontology. In fact, we already shared the publication, Mairin, last week to some of our students, and they're now using it as one of their references for their undergraduate and graduate theses. So aside from her numerous peer-reviewed publications, she has also mentored students at all levels and is a passionate advocate for science education and diversity in STEM. She is also actively engaged with the public through museum work, media, and outreach programs. Since 2022, she is the Augustine Family Curator of Paleontology at the Raymond Alf Museum of Paleontology and a research associate at the La Brea Tar Pits and Natural History Museums of Los Angeles County. She is also a researcher fellow at the Department of Life and Environmental Sciences at the University of California, Merced, and is a visiting scholar at the Kravis Department of Integrated Sciences in Claremont McKenna College. So, hindi ko na patatagalin ng introduction. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker for today, Dr. Mairin Balisi. Mairin?
Wow, maraming salamat po. Um, yeah, ang dami na palang nagawa. So it's easy to forget, kung anong ginagawa natin sa work. Okay, so let me try to share my screen. Okay, screen share. Okay, play. Okay, paano po yan? Can you see my screen
Yes,
okay?
we
Yeah,
see
we
it.
can
Yeah.
see your screen, yeah.
Okay. May bar po ba na is the bar blocking anything or no?
No,
Uh,
the full
it's
screen.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, maraming salamat po ulit at magandang umaga sa inyo. 6 p.m. dito. So, yeah, pero it's awesome. Um, okay, so I live in Los Angeles. So, full disclosure, actually, sorry. Um, I'm going to start my talk, but I'm going to start it with my personal story. Okay, so thank you. Welcome to Finding the Ice Age in Your Backyard. And let's time travel to the 1990s. So, noong 1990s, nasa Pilipinas pa ako. So, yan ako wearing a cat sweater sa Baguio. So, this was probably the first indication in my life that I was going to grow up to study fossil carnivores. Kasi cat sweater. And then, yan yung mama ko. So my mother was a school teacher. She taught biology. So that's also, a sign of how I would grow up. She taught biology at St. Teresa's College sa Quezon City. Yeah, meron ba tayong mga Teresiana sa audience? I don't know. Okay, so,
Pinsan.
yan kami. Oh, sorry, ano po?
Maraming mga pinsan. Oo.
Marami mga pinsan, oo. St. Teresa's College. Okay, so diyan kami sa Baguio, on vacation. And I never thought anything of it until I grew up and I realized we were living in a tropical country, right? And yet there were pines, which are not typically considered a tropical tree. And so I'm going to do something risky actually right now and talk about something that I don't know too much about because when I was living in the Philippines, I wasn't really exposed to geology. I wasn't really exposed to paleontology. My mother, um, like maybe a couple times bumisita kami sa National Museum, but that was, all the exposure to paleontology that I had. One time pumunta rin kami sa Calao Cave, pero kasi taga Cagayan kami, pero um, I never knew that there were fossils in there that were, not human, right? That there were animal fossils in there as well. So, my next slide again will be about something that I don't really know about, but I want to talk about it because I want to hear your thoughts afterwards. So, growing up in the Philippines and then seeing Baguio and seeing the pines in Baguio, I wondered, okay, so I live now in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Manila. And of course, Manila is in the tropics. So what were pines doing in a tropical country, right? And I didn't know the answer when I was little, but when I grew up and started studying paleontology, I drew the conclusion from what I read that it was probably because of the Ice Age, right? So these pines were probably a remnant of the Ice Age when sea levels were lower and there was greater land connectivity, right? So that is what I have gathered from my reading, but I would love to hear more about it from you all afterwards, because I'm sure all of you have thought about this stuff. So, starting from an early age, even though I didn't know it, I was growing up, as with all of you, I was growing up with the Ice Age in my backyard, even though I didn't think about it that way at the time, right? Because when I was growing up, there was no paleontology, there was no geology exposure for me. And so I think it's so great that, you all are here and you've been here the entire time. And I only wish that I had been as lucky as, the students in the audience to have gotten this exposure when I was younger and still over there. Anyway, so that was in the 1990s, right? And then in 2000, that was when nag-immigrate kami ng pamilya ko from Manila to California. And I went to high school in Southern California, Orange County. And then I went to college at UC Berkeley. And it was at UC Berkeley that I got my first exposure, my first real exposure to paleontology through a class, right? So this class had us deal with fossils that were in the bell tower. So in the picture here, there's the a really tall bell tower at UC Berkeley, and people go there for the bells. But actually, if you get into the elevator and go to the very top where the clock is, you are passing by floors upon floors of fossils. Okay, so fossils like the dire wolf that is, on the screen there. And those fossils of dire wolves and saber-toothed cats, they are from the La Brea tar pits, which is the subject of my talk. So my first fossil, right, that I was exposed to at UC Berkeley also happened to be from the La Brea tar pits. And that's because in the early 1900s, when the tar pits were being excavated in Los Angeles, in Southern California, there was no place to put the bones down there. So some bones ended up in Berkeley. So I can talk more about that story another time. Anyway, this is still part of my introduction. So from UC Berkeley, where I did my undergrad, nung nag-graduate ako, I moved on to Michigan, where I continued to work on La Brea fossils. That's where I got my master's in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Michigan. And then after that, bumalik ako sa California, where I did my PhD at UCLA. And then I did a couple of postdocs after that. So I got a National Science Foundation fellowship that I brought to work on site at the La Brea Tar Pits. And I also did a postdoc with UC Merced. And then now I am speaking to you from my office at the Alf Museum. still in Southern California, still close to LA, still in LA County and close to the tar pits. Okay, so that is, that's briefly how I got here, right? From the Philippines to being a paleontologist in California and still having questions that, I don't quite know the answer to, but I'm hoping that you can help answer for me. So, as a paleontologist, as I'm sure all of you have been doing, I've gotten to explore a good number of places, right? And a lot of my work has been on the last ice age or the Pleistocene. I have also done some work generally throughout the Cenozoic. So generally, I study mammals, and those mammals can be like 40 million years old, right? But a lot of my work has been in the Pleistocene. So, for example, oh no, my photos are not showing up. Sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, for example, um, I've excavated in Mexico at this place called El Golfo de Santa Clara. Beautiful sunsets. So there are really great microsites here, so microfossils. I've also excavated a natural trap cave, which is a pitfall trap in Wyoming. So this is about 250,000 years old. There's fossils of not dire wolves, but really old gray wolves. And this past summer, which was the last time that I was there, there was an entire mammoth, right, that fell into the cave. But this is a pitfall trap. The cave is about 72 to 75 feet deep. So you rappel in and you rappel out. So it's a lot of fun. I've also done some work at Gypsum Cave. So about 13,000 years old. This is in the state of Nevada. And what you're seeing there is some sloth poop, right? So sometimes sloth poop gets so fresh, it's still so fresh, even though it's 13,000 years old, that, you can almost smell it. And then, of course, I've done a lot of work at the La Brea Tar Pits, and that is what I'll be talking about today. And on the left here, that is yeah, a shot from a documentary that we filmed the other year for National Geographic. Okay, so with that, I am done introducing myself and how I got here. So let's dig into the geology, right? So asphalt seeps, what are they anyway? All right, so common misconceptions about asphalt seeps. Okay, they must be hot, right? They must be from a volcano, and we can thank Hollywood for that because of the movie Volcano. And yeah, there's just a lot of, or people think, oh, they're like quicksand, right? So animals step in and they sink. So really what asphalt is it's basically the very crudest form of crude oil, right? So the Los Angeles basin, it sits on top of a massive oil field called the Salt Lake oil field, and it is those oil deposits that, seep up uh, through the ground because California, as in the Philippines, right? Y'all get earthquakes. We get earthquakes too, a lot of them sometimes. And so, yeah, so earthquake country, and you have this oil field underneath a major metropolitan area, right? So this asphalt oozes up through these, fissures in the ground created by tectonic activity and pools on the surface as these very sticky but shallow deposits. And yeah, so they basically entrap everything, and it's great. So asphalt preserves um, past ecosystems, is how I think about it. They present a unique opportunity uh, because they preserve many different kinds of fossils that wouldn't normally be preserved altogether. So, for example, there's not only large mammals, but also small mammals. There's not only vertebrates, but also plants. Um, and there's just a huge variety of organisms that have been preserved there. And so it really provides a window into the past. All right, one common question that we get is, are there other tar pits or asphalt seeps anywhere, or is it just the La Brea tar pits that we have? Well, yes, there are tar pits of the world, but here I show you just tar pits of the Americas, right? So tar pits of the Americas include, so in California alone, there's actually 4 tar pits, right? So California, in the upper left there, we have Carpinteria on the coast, McKittrick, Maricopa, which are in the Central Valley of California, and Rancho La Brea or La Brea tar pits. And there's also the South American asphalt seeps, right? So from Ecuador to Peru, Venezuela, Trinidad, Cuba, all of those have asphalt seeps. And beyond this map, there's also asphalt seeps in Azerbaijan, and asphalt seeps in Ukraine, and also apparently Japan. So now that we've been working on asphalt seeps, it's me and my collaborators at the tar pits. Now we're starting to hear more about asphalt seeps everywhere, which is really cool because we had no idea that there were that many asphalt seeps in the world. But for today, again, our focus is Rancho La Brea. And as you can see on this plot, the asphalt seeps are different from each other in a lot of ways. Particularly on this plot, this shows the taxonomic differences among the different asphalt seeps. So the California asphalt seeps tend to have a lot of carnivores, and the Peruvian and one of the Ecuadorian asphalt seeps also a lot of carnivores. But a lot of the other asphalt seeps, so for example, the Ecuador and Cuba and Trinidad asphalt seeps, those are dominated by sloths, right? So there are differences among them. Um, and shown here is just the taxonomic differences, but there's also, yeah, differences in how asphaltic they are, how much they are primary versus secondarily deposited, things like that. And we're just now, starting to unpack all of these differences, even though the La Brea tar pits itself has been studied for almost 100 years. But most of the attention on asphalt seeps has focused on the La Brea tar pits, even though there's so much more work done to be done elsewhere. All right, so where again are the La Brea tar pits? So here we have a map of Los Angeles. If you have not been here yet, I hope you get to visit us. It's a pretty cool place. So right there on the right is the Elf Museum where I work right now. And then on the left there is La Brea tar pits. So a bit closer to the coast than where we are. And if you look at Google Maps, it's in the middle of a big city. It's in the middle of Los Angeles, right? So there's a big apartment complex to the north. There's a big, these big office buildings to the east. There's this other major museum to the west. So it is a pretty atypical place to have an active fossil excavation. But it also opens up, its location in one of the world's biggest cities also opens up some unique opportunities. So, for example, these giant mammoth sculptures, right? That probably every child in Los Angeles knows about them. So this is just in people's backyard, right? They have a fossil excavation in their backyard, and that's pretty cool. So let's get back into our time machine. This is what the tar pits looks like now. Okay. Time machine goes back to 1914, which is when the fossils were being excavated, or most of the fossils were being excavated, and also when Naturalist Museum was collecting in this area. And this is how it looked, just more than a century ago. So there's, a little asphalt seep in the foreground, there's oil derricks in the background, and then in the far background, there's the Santa Monica Mountains. So I mentioned, that the asphalt seeps are the product of the oil field that lies underneath LA, and there was active oil extraction happening in this area at that time. These days, the oil extraction is happening a bit farther from the area, so a lot of people live, in this area now. So there's no more oil extraction here. Now, time machine goes to the last ice age, right? The late Pleistocene, about 13,000 years ago, and it looks a bit different, right? So we still have our asphalt seep in the foreground, but there is now a saber-toothed cat, there's a giant ground sloth, there's these massive birds of prey, and in the background, there's mammoths, mastodons. I think I see some wolves, like dire wolves in the background to the right. And yeah, so it just looks like a very different sort of place from the big city that we have today. But I like to think that the landscape, the geography of the place holds it together, like links the present to the past. Because, okay, you've probably seen the Hollywood sign, right? Well, those mountains in the background, that is where the Hollywood sign is now. Like literally. So, yeah, again, Ice Age in your backyard. Okay, so the La Brea tar pits, the dominant mode of preservation of fossils is asphaltic entrapment. This is how we think it happened. So, here you have some bison enjoying a nice drink of water, but the water actually is, in an asphalt seat, which can happen. So the bison get entrapped. And over time, the bison struggle to break free of the asphalt. They are unsuccessful, and their struggles are heard by these saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, who then, go after the bison that's entrapped and become entrapped themselves. And over time, the remains of these animals accumulate, right, over tens of thousands of years. So this was happening for at least 55,000 years here in the Los Angeles basin. And so asphalt is pretty dynamic. And so as the asphalt moves and as water moves through the entire system, the skeletons eventually become disarticulated. But yeah, so this is the predominant hypothesis for uh, how asphalt fossils accumulate. So in 1913 to 1915, there was the collection's emphasis was on megafauna. So that partly explains the numbers that we get. Okay, so there were a lot of fossils of American lion, short-faced bears, dire wolves, yesterday's camel, antique bison, and let's see, yeah, so Western horse. And carnivores, again, are the most abundant in terms of number of identified specimens. However, we have been getting more recently more and more evidence of other depositional scenarios. What I mean by that is, so, a century ago when they were collecting just the big animals and literally, they were collecting the small things only if they were stuck to the big things. And by small things, I mean like rodents, right? Or insects or plant material. So all that stuff was getting lost because the people a century ago, the scientists a century ago, didn't care about that stuff so much. But more and more, we are starting to recognize that actually smaller things can tell bigger stories, right? About environmental change over time. Because if you think about, a bison, for example, um, or, yeah, so if you think about a big animal like a bison, it's gonna be moving around a lot, right? The bigger the animal, the larger the geographic range. But if you think about a plant or even a rodent, right? Something small is going to have a smaller radius around which to move. And so it's more likely to preserve signatures of its local environment. And so it's with that recognition that researchers at the tar pits, such as Alexis Mikhailo, whose paper I cite here, um, yeah, so more and more researchers at the tar pits these days are focusing on like what can we learn about the ecosystem from these small things. So, for example, right here, Alexis and colleagues found a neotoma, like a wood rat midden. And so, which is really surprising because, most fossil sites probably would not preserve these coprolites, right? Because they're soft. But asphalt is really great at preserving things. And so, they radiocarbon dated these. They turned out to be, 55,000 years old, so relatively old, which was a big surprise. All right. So, in conclusion, asphalt seeps, they are a unique opportunity to study past ecosystems because they entrap a range of organisms across a range of environments. And even though it might seem that the La Brea tar pits has been extremely well studied already, there's still a lot that is not known about asphalt seeps more generally. So if any of you, if your curiosity is piqued after this talk, yeah, come find me and we can chat more. Okay, next step, megafaunal carnivores. So I mentioned that Rancho La Brea is primarily a carnivore trap. And that, it because it trapped so many carnivores, that gives us these really unique opportunities to study extinct predators. And I'm going to focus in this section on paleopathologies. So, paleopathologies are diseases and injuries that are preserved in fossils. And the tar pits is unique in that, they have so many fossils. Like, for example, number of individuals alone, they have over 4,000 direwolves and over 2,000 saber-toothed cats. And when you get those big numbers, that enables analyses that are not possible anywhere else, right? So pathologies actually are rare, um, generally. They're also rare at the La Brea tar pits. For example, in this 2017 study that we did that I mentioned on this slide. So that's our nature ecology evolution study. Caitlin Brown and I, we were grad students in the same lab. We counted 35,000 bones, or we looked at 35,000 bones of direwolf and saber-toothed cat, and we found only 3% prevalence of pathologies, right? So only 3% of the bones had signs of abnormality or deformation. So 3%, that's small. But if it's 3% of 35,000, right, that's how you start to see these rare phenomena. Okay, so yes, at the La Brea tar pits, the most abundant species are direwolf and saber-toothed cat, represented by thousands of individuals, not just bones. Um, and they are also the most abundant species in the pathology collection at the tar pits. So there's enough specimens at the tar pits that have pathologies that there is a separate pathology collection. So if that interests you, there's still a lot of work to be done on that collection. All right, so this orange box on the left is there because that's going to be the focus of the next few slides. So in 2017, Caitlin Brown and I looked at the bigger picture of pathologies, right? So Caitlin, she came into it with a geographic information systems background, and she wanted to map the occurrence of pathologies on the skeletons. So what we found when we did that, oh, and reminder, the skeletons are disarticulated, right? So what you're seeing here are aggregate patterns of pathology. And what we found is down below. So the panels labeled B and D. So in the saber-toothed cat on the left, we found hot spots of injury in the rotator cuff of the shoulder, in the lower back, lower trunk, and also lower back, and also in the foot. And in the dire wolf, we found different hotspots. The hotspots of injury that we found were in the paws, right? And this makes sense considering that evidence from other sources suggests that the saber-toothed cat was an ambush predator and the dire wolf was a pursuit predator. So these injuries validate, those hypotheses of their predatory styles because if you're an ambush predator, you are probably, once you pounce onto your prey is a large animal. It has to be because you're large. So when you pounce on your prey, that you're probably going to wrestle with your prey, and that's going to strain your shoulder. That's going to strain your back, right? As you, grapple with your prey. Meanwhile, if you are a dire wolf and your main mode of hunting is by running after your prey, right? You're probably going to get hurt most in your legs and also the front of your skull because a dire wolf is basically a running pair of jaws, right? So saber-toothed cats, um, they have, this really cool suite of adaptations for hunting. So, of course, they have the big knife-like teeth, but they also have paws, big paws, that can, supinate, pronate. So that means that they can, grab onto prey and actually wrangle with it. The dire wolf cannot do that, right? Like, kung may aso kayo sa bahay, di ba? Like, your dog can't, like, really grapple with things the way a cat can. So yeah, these patterns of injury we found validated previous hypotheses of hunting behavior in these animals. Now, those are chronic or traumatic injuries. So these are injuries that are sustained over repeated behavior over a lifetime, right? So um, these are things like arthritis, for example, from chronic overuse. Now we found other types of injuries. So in addition, these are dire wolves that I'm showing you right now. And in addition to the injuries in the manus and pes of the dire wolf, we also found in the lower jaws abscesses, alveolar absorption, and tooth breakage. So the abscesses, those are signs of infection. Okay, now how did the dire wolf get its jaws infected? Well, probably because they were bone cracking. So think of hyenas, right? So hyenas crack bone. They are scavengers and they crush the bones of prey larger than themselves. And so direwolves probably were engaging in similar behavior, getting to the marrow of the bones, which is really nutritious. And then what about the injury on the right? So what you're seeing there is a healed oblique fracture. So this is a shin bone, the lower leg. Um, and yeah, these bones, and there's multiple of them, right? I'm showing you three different broken shin bones that healed, but didn't heal correctly. So you can still see the injury. And what we think happened there is that that is direct evidence of survival after a devastating injury. So I mentioned that for dire wolves, they are running predators. So they need to be able to chase after prey in order to feed and survive. Now, if they're not, they won't be able to do that so well if their leg is broken, right? And yet, these shin bones are healed, right? So this animal did not die right away of starvation. Rather, it healed and lived to eat and hunt another day. So this is one of the pieces of evidence that we draw on to that we think suggests social behavior in the dire wolf, because if the dire wolf were not able to get food some other way, it might not have survived long enough for this healing to happen. All right, so that's the dire wolf. Now the saber-toothed cat, though. Okay, what I'm showing you right now is what somebody in 1930 described as the most strikingly pathological object in the collection of Rancho La Brea fossils. It is a hip bone that, if you're looking at the right side of it over there, you can see that the right side is just destroyed. And into 2021, we revisited this specimen, which was first described in 1930. So almost 100 years later, we came back to this specimen, which was a hip bone and the associated femur. And for this, we partnered with orthopedic surgeons at Cedars-Sinai, and we found that this Smilodon had hip dysplasia. So previously, we had thought that, oh, this was an infected animal. It probably hurt its hip while it was hunting, because hunting is a dangerous activity. But there was no sign of fracture in the pelvis, right? And our orthopedic surgeon colleagues, they study hips regularly, and they were like, yeah, this is classic hip dysplasia, which is where the ball and socket of the hip joint does not form properly. So that means that this animal never had a normal hip on that side. It always had a bit of a limp and degenerated as it got older. And it did get older, okay? Oh, and yes, hip dysplasia might be recognizable to you all because it also afflicts modern cats. And here are some x-rays of modern cats from my own co-authors. So the Maine Coon is a breed of modern cat that supposedly has a lot of prevalence of hip dysplasia. So it's thought that large body size might be a cause of that, but inbreeding is also a possible cause of that. So I think that there's more to be done on the veterinary side. I did mention, though, that this Smilodon grew to adulthood, right? So how was it able to do that, given that it needed to hunt large prey and given that it didn't have access to veterinary care, right? So the plots here are just showing you. So the dysplastic hip is the big orange dot in all of these, and the big orange dot is plotting among all the other dots, which are all adults, right? So these are all proxies for body size. So how is this animal able to grow to adulthood? And this is another piece of indirect, admittedly, evidence that we think suggests, although of course not definitively, but we think that it suggests social behavior in Smilodon as well. And conveniently, just before we published our paper, this other paper came out that, found Smilodon in South America and inferred that these three Smilodon were related because of a particular tooth that they have. And the three Smilodon were interpreted to be a mom and two almost grown cubs. So these other scientists, Ashley Reynolds et al., they inferred a long weaning time for Smilodon based on their evidence. And so we think that, okay, there must be some sociality going on, or at least family care for an animal with a really bad hip to have been able to survive to old age, even though it would have needed that hip to be a good hunter, right? As an ambush predator launching itself onto its prey. All right, and I think we are getting close on time, so I'll just speed through the rest of these. Lastly, I've talked about the large animals, but I also mentioned that smaller animals may present bigger stories, right, of environmental change over time. And at the tar pits, there has definitely been environmental change. So just a couple years ago, a team I'm a team of colleagues, I was not on this paper, but basically they found uh, by looking at evidence from the tar pits and, from pollen from a lake. So they basically pulled together a whole lot of evidence, including traces of fire through charcoal. They found that basically there was this massive environmental transition in Southern California. So in the upper left, you have, 15,000 years before present, where it was a more, this was still, a nice woodland area, relatively moist, a bit cooler. And then over the next few thousand years, relatively quickly, you start seeing a warming and drying of the landscape, and the final straw, increased incidence of fire as you get closer to the end of the Pleistocene. And so by 12,000 years before present, you see traces of our modern Southern California landscape where, it is golden a lot of the time, right? It's kind of brown. Um, it's not quite desert. It is still a Mediterranean biome, but it is relatively dry and warm, and we no longer have megafauna. So that transition from yes megafauna to no megafauna happened around this time as the result of environmental change. And my work has focused on the large carnivores, right? But there is this term body size downgrading, or trophic downgrading, that describes this phenomenon where, across all the continents, other than Antarctica, really, you see um, basically so this is a series of plots on the right showing body size distributions. And across all the continents, you see the highest range of all of these distributions get lopped off at the late Pleistocene. So by the end of the Pleistocene, at the beginning of, our time as humans on this planet, right? We are seeing a changed world. So it used to be a world where a lot of animals were larger, and now we live in a world of smaller animals. Now, a lot of people have been focused on that story of extinction, but I like to think that I'm an optimist, so I'm curious about the story of survival that is preserved here, right? So here we have the direwolf wall at the La Brea Tar Pits. This is a display of 400 direwolf skulls. Um, and it's probably their most famous display. But what I would like to highlight here is that even though there are 4,000 direwolves that have been found there also were smaller animals, right? There was gray fox, striped skunk, bobcat, badger, and others. But what's striking about these smaller animals is that they are still around today. And they're not just around, they're around right here in Los Angeles. For example, I see skunks all the time, like by my house, right? So I like to think of the last ice age not only as a time of megafauna, but that's also the last time that megafauna coexisted with smaller animals. And today, all we have left are the smaller animals because of climate change and extinction and increasing human impacts. So more recently, I've been focused on the mesocarnivores, the small to medium-sized mammalian carnivores. And I've been focused on them with this really great team of students. So this project has been going on since 2019. And so I've mentored a lot of students over that time to collect data on these mesocarnivores to track change in them from the fossil record to modern day. So we work not just with fossils, but also with more recent remains. And what so far have we found? We haven't published this stuff yet, but it is very much in prep. I'm working on a lot of publications right now. So we radiocarbon dated a bunch of these animals, and this is what we found. So all of these specimens that are radiocarbon dated are from the La Brea Tar Pits. And the dashed orange line that is the late Pleistocene, right? That's the Pleistocene to Holocene transition. So what we found so far is that gray foxes and bobcats and striped skunks are older, and badgers seem to be youngest. So basically, there are differences in the mesocarnivores about when they coexist, if they coexisted with the larger animals or not. Which is interesting because historically, people thought that, oh, if it's tar pits, it's probably Pleistocene. But we are seeing signatures that are Holocene here as well. So getting that resolution in time is just cool. And then, so now that we have the chronology, right, what can we tell about body size change over time? Unfortunately, our sample sizes are not great enough for me to, do a nice regression over time, but this is what we have so far. So for all of these plots, fossil is on the left and modern is on the right. And generally, fossils are bigger, right? So these mesocarnivores seem to have decreased from the Pleistocene or from fossil to modern day. So there are different degrees of size decrease. So the bobcat seems to have had the biggest decrease, while the badger the least decrease. That makes sense given that the fossil bobcats are older, so they've had more time to change and more environmental change to respond to, whereas the badgers are Holocene, right? So they've had less time and less environmental change to adjust to. I also try to look at stable isotopes for this stuff. So specifically looking at carbon and nitrogen over time. So the carbon portrays, C3, C4 plants, and the nitrogen typically is considered to reflect less meat versus more meat in the diet, or trophic distribution. And what we have found so far, okay, so I show here a lot of data. So the convex hulls, those are data that are pulled from the references that are here on the lower right. And the raw data for the mesocarnivores are in the dots. And so the mesocarnivores plot where they're expected to plot, they are medium sized, right? So they're not going to be plotting as high as the megacarnivores, but they are still relatively carnivorous, so they're not going to be plotting with the small herbivores. So they are plotting as expected. What I would like to know about more is the Holocene ecosystem. So these data points, these samples that we have are primarily Pleistocene, so we don't know enough about the Holocene yet. But then we have the historic time slice, right? So these are our modern mesocarnivores that are plotted here. And hopefully you'll be able to see, right? So the axes are all the same here. For modern mesocarnivores, they are just all over the place. Okay? So these days, there are no more mega herbivores, no more mega carnivores. We still do have small herbivores and we still do have the coyote. So small herbivores and coyote are not shown here. But even without those two groups, it is already interesting how it looks like mesocarnivores have just kind of exploded all over the place in a classic case of what we call mesocarnivore release, which is if mesocarnivores don't have potential competitors or don't have potential predators, they just do whatever they want, right? So that is how we are interpreting this. Now, if we look species-wise, though, at mesocarnivores, so here are different colors, Pleistocene in purple, Holocene in greenish, historic in yellow. What we will see is that, okay, so splitting carbon and nitrogen, those are the values for Pleistocene across the different species. And historic, there is a difference, right? And the difference is significant in a whole lot of cases. Now, what could that mean? So carbon, we're using as a proxy for vegetation, right? So we're thinking this could reflect more vegetational change toward more C4 plants. And the nitrogen, typically, it is interpreted as a, more meat, less meat proxy. But that doesn't really make sense here because if you look, for example, at mustela, so mustela is weasels and Pleistocene weasels, if we interpret this as a meat signal, this suggests that Pleistocene weasels were eating less meat and modern or historic weasels are eating more meat. Um, Not so sure about that. So I've been talking with collaborators recently as well, and there could be a shift in baseline nitrogen that we don't know about yet, right? That could be caused by the environmental change itself. So we need to do some more background research to explain this more thoroughly. So that is the work in progress for mesocarnivores, and I'd like to tie it into, you know, the paper that we just put out, right? About big questions in paleobiology and also generally leveraging paleobiology for conservation decisions. So, you know, I think that when people find out that I'm a paleontologist, I think they think that I study just dead animals, right? But everything that we see today is the product of our past, right? And if we think about conservation, well, modern conservation, we need to understand how organisms will behave under global change. And if we look to the past is a record of that global change. And so I'd like to encourage, using the past to help navigate the future, using natural history collections to provide the necessary data that looks beyond the last 30 years, right? Looks beyond the last century. But I think that deeper time can hold a lot of answers to questions that we don't even know how to navigate. So I leave you with this. Since the Ice Age extinctions, we have lived in a world of smaller animals. But just look around you, because echoes of the Ice Age remain with us today. And thank you. Oh, and just for explanation, this is a mountain lion, P22. There are mountain lions at the La Brea Tar Pits, but we still have mountain lions today. So I think that's really cool.
Thank you very much, Mairin. Very nice talk.
Thank you so much.
Before we go to the Q&A, I would like to acknowledge the participants of this Zoom. I saw Dr. Ian Fontanilla from the Institute of Biology. Is Ian still here? Hi, Doc Ian.
Hello.
Then we also have colleagues from the National Museum of the Philippines, Geology and Paleontology Division. Of course, we have students from UP NIGS, from the National Institute of Geological Sciences. And we also have Amir Hakim. So Amir, are you there? Amir is from Malaysia. He just recently published the first stegodon fossil from Malaysia.
I saw
Hi,
that.
Amir.
Congratulations, Amir.
Okay, so I hope I was able to recognize all participants. And we have from UP Los Baños as well, from the Environment Science Institute in the University of the Philippines in Los Baños, Laguna. Okay, and from De La Salle University also, we have a participant from De La Salle. Okay, Gian?
So thank you for that wonderful discussion, Miss Mairin. And now the floor is open for questions. So if you have any questions, please please raise your hand using the raise hand emoji. And once acknowledged, you may unmute your mic to present your question to Miss Mairin. You can also chat your question in the chat box, and we will read it to Miss Mairin.
May I actually ask a question first? So, yeah, what is up with Baguio and the pines? Like, did what I say make sense, or is there an updated story that I don't know about?
Melissa?
I really don't know about exactly if there really is like a paleobiogeographic natural, route to the pines, but Baguio and most of the northern areas, or most that Baguio district is actually there were a lot of American mines in those areas. So if you know Otley Bayer, so a lot of anthropologists, archaeologists also did a lot of work. I don't know when did Otley Bayer and all of those guys started? Maybe in the right after, probably just before the Spanish American War. So that would be 1898. So just before that, I think probably there was already interest also in our mines here, which probably was also the impetus for that bogus Spanish-American War. That also, of course, affected California and Mexico in our part, and especially our part of the world where we were sold for $1, I think. So I think there might be also a man-made route to it, but I'm not too sure. Pines are also present. There might be botanists in the audience from LB,
Yeah, if I
Los Baños.
if I remember it right, Ma'am Alisa, I saw a slide somewhere around NIGS that you have pine pollens
Yeah,
from fossil record from
yeah,
Laguna,
yeah,
Libay,
yeah,
if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
yeah.
But regarding the route or the timing of when the pines arrive in the Philippines, I'm really not sure about it.
Yeah, I think I have to correct myself. Thank you, Alan. My memory is going, I think. Just remembering that the Stegodon site in Tres Hermanas in Antipolo, when we had the palynomorphs dated by a German palynologist professor who was visiting then, they found mostly pinus. It was also pine. So that was when the time scale wasn't changed yet. It was a Pleistocene, so 1 to 2 million years at that time. So it's still the Pleistocene, right? So we had it here. So you might be right. I don't know where the pine came from.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it probably moved along with the mammals on their hooves or whatever. Not too sure, but the temperature is right though. So at that time it was a lot cooler. So in the areas where we have grasslands now, there probably were pine forests of some sort.
Well, it sounds like a great student project to learn more about
Yeah.
that stuff. That's so exciting.
Yeah, so it's around Pleistocene, right? It's a Pleistocene pollen record from Laguna Formation, yeah,
Yeah,
along with the Stegodon remains.
yeah.
But other than that, we really are not sure when the pines arrive here in the Philippines. But I think it is recognized that the pines we have in Baguio are a separate or a distinct species of pine. They call it the Benguet pine.
Ah,
And then we have another pine tree species, Mindoro. It's another island south of Luzon. They call it Mindoro pine, but I don't know the origin or relationship with the pines we have from continental or mainland Asia.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
another
but
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
if Mairin has contacts with any palynologists who would like to start training, retraining our people, because my generation was trained, but nobody took it up. The only one who, all of the palynology labs actually went away. So we used to have three in three different government agencies, the National Museum included, but we lost all of the main proponents. They migrated, all things happened, including our own institute. We were not able to support it because it just needs a lot of money.
Yeah, I wish I could help more, but yeah, if I meet anybody, if I make connections, I will be sure to suggest it.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
I probably have this might be a silly question, Myrene. I'm not too sure because I'm not a biologist, but we teach it in paleontology. We teach adaptive radiation as a form of, taking advantage of a niche. I wonder if you're mesocarnivores, is that what's going on with the mesocarnivores then? With the historic record that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the adaptive radiation stuff, that tends to happen on evolutionary time scale. So what I've presented is a relatively short time scale. So I don't think that would be adaptive radiation. But in my other work that I didn't present here, we do see adaptive radiations there. So in my other work, I've studied the last 40 million years of North American fossil dogs. And yeah, so that is a very diverse group. They had, let's see, they had over 100 species of fossil dog. The peak was like 29 species 25 million years ago in North America alone. And And yeah, so there were definitely adaptive radiations there, in that system that we can see because we are looking at a longer span of time. So the radiations in that system involved, there were multiple radiations, for example, of bone cracking dogs. So that were not dire wolves, right? Not hyenas. They're all extinct now. Um, but yeah, there were just a lot of them filling this niche of bone crackers. But yeah, there is an analogous phenomenon in the ecological timescales. Um, for mesocarnivores in particular, yeah, it's something called mesocarnivore release. But yeah, it's kind of a similar concept, just different timescales. Yeah. Yep, yep. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Are there questions in the chat box, Gian? None. I'll ask a question, a very quick question, Mairin. So in the case of the Pleistocene megafaunal extinctions, how do we balance the weight of climate versus the anthropogenic drivers?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And let me actually I'll share my screen again so I show that the one slide that I had that was relevant to it. So, okay. Whoops. There we go. Okay. So, all right. So this fire hypothesis, right? And I think that they have pretty good this team, O'Keefe et al. They were able to gather a pretty robust body of evidence for that. So I'll just talk more about what they found. Um, so they radiocarbon dated hundreds of specimens of the five most abundant species at the tar pits: saber-toothed cat, dire wolf, coyote, um, and camel and bison, right? So five. They radiocarbon dated those and they found that camel and bison went extinct first, right? Followed by the large carnivores, saber-tooth and dire wolf. And then coyote, we still have coyote today. Um, Now, the herbivores, so that was their evidence from the animals, but they also drew evidence from plants and they saw vegetation change happening first, right? They saw vegetation change responding to this climate change, basically. So there was already vegetation change that led the um, vegetation change and climate change that led the herbivores to go extinct first, which makes sense, right? Herbivores and then the carnivores that feed on them go extinct after that. But they also found this evidence of fire. Okay. So the fire evidence was their charcoal. So they have these lake cores from a nearby lake. And yeah, they quantified charcoal in those lake cores. And they found an increase in charcoal around 13,000 years before present. So what seems to have happened is that this was already a system that was approaching something. It was already undergoing some change. And then, oh, there's also evidence from, human demography, right? That they pulled into the paper as well. This paper is really cool. I can send it to y'all if you need. It's O'Keefe et al. 2023 in the journal Science, right? So you have uh, plants showing evidence of change. You have the herbivores going extinct and then the carnivores going extinct. And in all of that, there's also this increased fire frequency, which, kind of acts as an accelerator for all of this stuff. And the fire is human caused, right? So it's not all human caused. Fire can also be caused by lightning strikes. But especially here in Los Angeles, I think that we are very conscious of the ability of humans to set things on fire because, of the fires that we went through at the beginning of this year. So, yeah, the short answer to your question, Sir Alan, is it's all of the above, right? There was already change happening in the system, and then, the human influence with fire kind of acted, um, yeah, pushed this already stressed ecosystem over a tipping point into a different stable state, which is the stable state that we now have today, started about 12,000 years ago.
Thank you, Mairin.
Salamat po.
Gian.
So we have one question from the chat from Mr. Jericho Macunat. So his question is, do saber-toothed cats have their canines enclosed inside their lips, or are they exposed?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure if I have the answer to it. Like this has been debated. It's a subject of ongoing debate. Um, the most recent reconstructions that I've seen, they are by an artist, a paleo artist and anatomist named Mauricio Anton, from Spain. He's probably he's the leading paleo artist for carnivores these days. And I say that he's an anatomist because that's how he gets these reconstructions that are really accurate, right? Well, we think they're really accurate because they're based on what we know from the fossil record, with as little speculation as possible. And Mauricio would say that the canines are probably enclosed inside the lips, but maybe not entirely. So they probably, there would be like a little tip of a canine like exposed at the bottom, probably. Yeah, but great question. And I wish I could tell you definitively what it was, but that's the best I can do.
So another question from Mr. Vladimir De La Torre. His chat says, I wonder if coyote and gray wolf fossils or remains also exhibit decrease in body size over time, and what is the degree of the decrease in relation to badgers and lynxes?
Yeah, another really great question. So I didn't show coyote and gray wolf here because other people have studied them in the past. And so, but what I can say is that yes, coyotes absolutely exhibit change in body size over time. Not always a decrease, but okay, so in the Pleistocene in Southern California, we had saber-tooth, dire wolf, short-faced bear. Oh, let me actually go to my slide where I show that. Um, whoops, how do I? Okay, so we have, whoop. Okay, here, right? We had short-faced bear, saber-toothed cat, direwolf, American lion, four extremely large carnivores. Oh, and not labeled there is Homotherium or Maracinonyx. So there were at least five large carnivores at the tar pits alone. And there was also coyote. Now, yes, we do see size increase, or sorry, size decrease in the coyote after the extinctions, right? So that doesn't really make sense to us, at least initially, because, I would have expected coyotes to have gotten bigger after the extinctions, right? Because, oh, no more dire wolf. I can eat anything I want. But here's the thing, right? Um, the large carnivores died out, so there's no more competition from them. But the large herbivores died out too. So there is nothing big to eat. Okay, so that's one possible reason for the coyote getting smaller. Another possible reason is, when it had bigger competitors, it's also possible that it had to be bigger to be able to defend itself better. And so when that ecological competitive pressure went away, it is expensive to be bigger. And so if you don't have to be bigger, it's easier to be smaller. And gray wolf, we haven't looked at gray wolf. Um, so that's a great question because at the tar pits, we think that we have gray wolf, but we're actually not sure. So there are other researchers revisiting the gray wolf at the La Brea tar pits right now to see if it's actually gray wolf or not. But what we do know is that in gray wolves today, there is a gradient in their body size across geographic space. So the higher in latitude you go, the bigger the gray wolf you get. And also the colder you go, the bigger gray wolf you get. And this applies to other animals, other mammals as well. It's a physiological rule called Bergmann's rule. So colder temperatures, bigger animals. Um, and yeah, so Pleistocene gray wolf that's been found at other places in North America do seem bigger than other gray wolves. For example, at Natural Trap Cave in Wyoming, which was one of the sites that I mentioned earlier. Let me just show it again. So here's Natural Trap Cave, right? And at Natural Trap, we found a gray wolf, but we all thought it was a dire wolf because it was a large wolf. But, there was actually some DNA preserved in it, and the DNA showed that it was actually gray wolf, just a really large one. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Oh, so I see a question, or did I answer your question okay, Vladimir?
I think Gian can move on to the next question. I think there are more.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So the next question is from Mr. John Rui. So his question is, are there any birds in the tar pits?
Yes, there are so many birds in the tar pits. I didn't even mention them here. So here's my slide showing all the bones, all the boxes upon boxes of bones that were collected a century ago. And yes, I've talked about the mammals. There's a lot of mammals, but there are at least as many, if not more, birds, right? The mammals at the tar pits have gotten a lot of study because mammalogists are studying them. And yeah, there is no ornithology curator at the tar pits at the moment, but there should be, right? Because there's so many birds and they have not been studied anywhere as much. And the birds at the tar pits seem to be mostly carnivorous scavenging birds. So that's pretty interesting in itself, right? So there's some, smaller birds, some passerines as well, but primarily these massive birds of prey and scavenging birds. So still a carnivore trap in that respect. But more people need to study the birds at the tar pits.
For the next question from Mr. Denver Suyong. So his chat says, so this question is not related to the main discussion, but more on career and might help others here as well. So as a successful paleontologist, what can you suggest to people who already had a MS biology degree, opening close parenthesis, non-paleontology related, who wants to become a vertebrate paleontologist, and again, opening close parenthesis, with zero background in geology as well, which is very important in paleontology.
Yeah, great. Okay, let me go back to my slide where I show, an abbreviated version of my CV, right? Okay. So what you might notice here is I am a biologist. All my degrees are in biology, right? So I'm really honored to be speaking with you all, the National Institute of Geological Sciences. I'm not a geologist, okay? So, um, a bit of imposter syndrome right now. But what I'm saying is it can be done. All right, you can be a biologist and go into vertebrate paleontology. Even with, everything geology I've learned is through my work, right? Through the work that I'm doing today as a paleontologist. Um, okay, so how did I get here? Well, I think that so the people you work with is key. And so I can talk more about like what did I do at UC Berkeley? Okay, because that's when I got my start. When I went to UC Berkeley as an undergraduate, I never set out to be a paleontologist, right? Because again, I had no exposure to geology, no exposure to paleontology. I didn't know that um, all of you were in the Philippines and doing all this amazing work, right? Um, so my first exposure was in college and I went to UC Berkeley because, it's a good school and yeah, I had a scholarship, which is a pretty important part. So when you pursue your dreams, just keep in mind that you still need to eat and you still need to survive. So I went to Berkeley because they were paying for me and they were paying for me to eat and all that stuff and my tuition. So I was very lucky in that respect. But I went there, okay, who among you has like relatives who are nurses in America or doctors in America, right? Like, I'm sure, yeah, at least a couple of you, right? Because that's my family. Okay. So my family, an immigrant family in America, and my aunts were like, okay, go be a nurse, or if you don't want to be a nurse, then be a doctor. But like biomedical stuff was all they, had in mind, right? So I went to Berkeley. I started taking biology classes. At first, I was in molecular and cell biology. Um, did not enjoy it. Sorry. I don't know. I think I probably just didn't have good professors or something. So I was like, I don't like this. I'm gonna go study literature. So I literally went and enrolled in comparative literature. But then in my third year, I was like, man, I need to like earn money. So I was like, all right, let me try to figure out biology again. And Berkeley had a lot of different biology majors. So I tried something called integrative biology. And I'm so grateful that I found that major because in my first integrative biology class, that is when I met this professor, the professor for the class, Dr. Kevin Padian. He was an evolutionary biologist and he studied pterosaurs. And I was like, wow, like your stuff is what I read about in National Geographic, but I had no idea that real people do this stuff and I could do this stuff too, right? So through that professor, I met another professor who taught this class vertebrate morphology, still in the biology department, right? But vertebrate morphology was the class where the professor, Dr. Tony Barnosky, who's now retired, Tony Barnosky had us go to this bell tower on campus for our class, had us go to the very top of the bell tower to get bones from the bell tower and study the bones for a class project, right? So it was that connection that was my entry to here, right? So totally unpredictable. I went to Berkeley to become a nurse or a doctor because that's what my family wanted me to do. And, just tried things, right? I just tried things and, you know, was very lucky to have met these people who influenced me back then and who still are in my networks today. So I guess my advice, that was a long story, but my advice, my suggestion is to meet people, to show your interest, to volunteer in labs. Um, so even though I have emphasized, okay, you gotta make money to eat and stuff, like some volunteer work might be necessary um, to get your foot in the door, right? And once you start building those networks, you know, it matters less and less what your major was. Like it, once you start building that experience, right? So let me think.
Can we support what Myrene said? Although we're geologists, I feel the same way with biology. I'm the one who teaches paleontology. So I pretend to be a biologist, and I always say that in class. So I just skip all of the cell stuff and just, tell them, okay, they're all dead now. So that's all that's left. And then we go into the rock part of it. So but for those who are biologists in the audience, there are opportunities at our institute if you want to do it locally. Although we have some technical uh, uh, limitations because you have to do some of the geology classes for you to have a degree that says MS in geology. But pretty soon we're opening up our classes also for non-geologists. So we're opening up the prerequisite part of a lot of our curricula. So you can enter, the undergrads can now go into the paleontology class or the earth history class, I think, the paleontology class without taking a lot of geology beforehand. So we're trying to do that also at the graduate level. So that more non-geologists can go into paleontology. We really need a lot of help because it turns out our lab is the only one training the paleontologists in the country. So we need a lot of help, and so there are a lot of things to do in the lab. So there's still a lot, as you've heard from Irene, there's still a lot of things that can be discovered in the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Miss Alisa and Doc Alisa and Doc Maggie. So for our last question for today, this question is from Mr. Miguel Joven Villanueva. So his question is, his chat reads, I'd like to ask something about the Pleistocene megacarnivores. Were saber-toothed and cats, were saber-toothed cats and dire wolves in direct competition with each other, and how might they have interacted with other megacarnivores like the short-faced bear and American lion?
Hmm. So the short answer is yes. They were in direct competition with each other in that they were both big predators who could have eaten the same things. However, they overlapped in some ways, but given their different hunting strategies, so the saber-tooth being a pounce ambush predator, the direwolf being a running cursorial predator, they probably preferentially hunted different prey. And also, they probably also lived in slightly different environments. So the direwolf, it would have done better in a more open area, like a grassland, while a saber-toothed cat, it would have done better in a more closed environment that's maybe in midway between a woodland and a grassland. So so there was some separation between them in their habitat and in their hunting strategy, but there would have still been significant overlap in their prey items, which could have led to competition. The word competition is interesting because in an ecological context, there's resource overlap and then there's competition. Resource overlap, you can eat the same things, right? But if there's a lot of the things, there's no competition. You're just overlapping in what you eat. Competition suggests a resource limitation. And so, around the time of the last ice age, approaching the end of the Pleistocene, that competition probably would have been increasing with, all the stress that the ecosystem was in. And yeah, how might they have interacted with other megacarnivores like the short-faced bear and American lion? We know less about that. So the short-faced bear and American lion, they were also at the tar pits, but in much fewer numbers. So American lion, like both of them were around in like the hundreds of individuals, right? So the saber-toothed cat was definitely the top cat at the time. Um, and the short-faced bear, there's still debate about, how much was it an active predator and how much was it a scavenger. So if it was a scavenger, that's a different niche, right? So if it was a scavenger, it probably could have fed on prey subsidies like leftovers from saber-tooths and direwolves. Um, so that's one way that this short-faced bear might not have been in direct competition. Meanwhile, yeah, the American lion, I think we just don't know enough about how all of those were in competition. They all were eating similar things, but if they were in competition or not is less clear, just because competition has a very specific ecological meaning.
Okay, I think no more questions, no? But yeah, so I think after this talk of Myrene, a lot of the participants will contact us here at NIGS and the NanoWorks Laboratory, including our colleagues, of course, from the National Museum. Kasi I saw in the chat that there's one participant from Cebu. There's actually a National Museum branch in Cebu. So if you have any questions regarding the geology or paleontology from Cebu, you can actually coordinate with them or you can email us here at the NanoWorks Laboratory. And also we have not some, but several Facebook pages dedicated to promoting paleontology in the Philippines. So I already told Maylene about this, but we are micropaleontologists. So Ma'am Alisa and I are both micropaleontologists. But we have since diversified to studying other fossil groups, including, of course, the work of Mairik, who studied Stegodon and Elephas from Luzon Island. We have some students here working also with the fossil bovids and deer from the same site in Bacnotan, La Union. So we're really trying our best to accommodate anyone, no? Any background. In fact, it's not just geology, but even biology graduates are welcome to do graduate studies here in our institute, especially if they want to pursue a career in paleontology. So yeah, so because of my talk, we're expecting a lot of email, a lot of messages from the participants.
I know. I wish I could take students. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
take students in my current position, but I'm always happy to collaborate.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
if anyone has questions about megafauna, um,
yeah,
yeah, just let me know. Or mammals generally.
yeah. So take note of that. Miguel and Nathan is not here. So Miguel is a graduate student of mine. He's going to work on fossil bovids from Luzon. Yeah.
This has
Okay,
been
Gian. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this has been such an honor. Thank you so much. And this
Thank you, Maylene. Yeah.
also so meaningful to me because, as I keep saying, I had no exposure to geology or paleontology when I was in the Philippines. So this is so encouraging for me to see all of you here and doing the work that needs to be done because it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done. And when I was growing up, I was just like, wow, yeah, there's no paleontology here. And I was so wrong, but I just did not know. I had no exposure. So y'all are doing the important work. So thank you.
So when are you coming to the Philippines, Maylene?
I don't know. I was hoping today.
If
Let
only
us
we had
know.
Uh,
money.
Let us know.
I know, I know.
If only
Well,
we had money, we'd fly you. Yeah.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's fine. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so Gabriel Santos and we were talking about, we were like, oh, magpasko nga tayo sa Pilipinas one time. So,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. It
We're
might
going to
be,
arrange a field work for you. Yeah.
yes, I would love to join.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Gian?
So once again, thank you very much, Doc Mairin, for the wonderful and very insightful discussion. We would now like to present to you our certificate of appreciation for giving time on sharing a lecture entitled Finding the Ice Age in Your Backyard. So the certificate reads, so the University of the Philippines Diliman, National Institute of Geological Sciences, NanoWorks Laboratory, Paleontological Society of the Philippines, Juvenis Orbis Geological Fraternity, presents the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Mairin Francesca A. Balisi for her lecture entitled Finding the Ice Age in Your Backyard, given the third day of October 2025 as part of the 76th NIGS lecture series, signed by Dr. Alisa M. Pilea Alampay, the laboratory head of the NanoWorks Laboratory and president of the Paleontological Society of the Philippines, Dr. Noelina T. Ramos, the director of the National Institute of Geological Sciences, Dr. Leo T. Armada, advisor of the Juvenis Orbis Geological Fraternity. Now we would like to request a photo of you, Dr. Mairin, with the certificate, and after a photo opportunity with our participants for today's NIGS lecture. So, one, two, three. That's one, two, three. So now we would like to request for the participants, if you are able to open your camera, please do, so that we will be able to have a photo opportunity with Dr. Mairin. So let's wait for a while for other participants. So yeah. Again, we request for your participants to, if you're able to, please turn on your cameras. Yeah. So okay, so ready? One, two, three. Okay, again, one, two, three. All right. So thank you very much, Dr. Mairin, for
Thank you,
that.
Mairin.
Thanks,
Thank you
Myrene.
so much. This
Thank you
was
very
so
much.
fun.
Looking forward to meet you here in in Manila or kung makapunta kami dyan sa LA.
Yeah, please. Well, siguro hindi ngayon kasi
Yeah,
alam niyo yung sitwasyon namin dito.
Oo.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, pero 'di ba may conference sa Thailand ulit?
Yes, this coming November. Unfortunately, we won't be able to attend. Are you going to attend?
Oh no, I was thinking of the next one, I think next year.
Is it next year?
I think so. I might be misremembering.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 20, I'll look at the calendar because there's another conference in Konkan this November. It's the Paleontology of Southeast Asia. And then there's another one, I think, yeah, you're right. I think next year there's another one in Thailand. So
Yay!
let's see if we can make it.
I would love that. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I
Thank you
hope
very much.
yeah, we should collaborate. So, let's stay in touch.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
again.
everybody.
Thank you
Okay,
po.
bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank
Magandang
you,
gabi,
everyone.
Maylene. Yeah, thank you,
Magandang umaga.
everyone.
Bye.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you, NM Pips. Thank you for coming.
Ian, thank you. Wala si Ian. Nasa si
Ian
Ian.
is now the new AVP for Faculty
Talaga.
Development.
Yeah.
Sige, salamat everyone.
Thank you,
Salamat sa
thank
mga
you. Nice to
organized.
see you,
IO, thanks.
Jericho. Thank you.